So I'd like to introduce you to Pastor James Huang. He's someone who, after serving as a missionary in China, now ministers in Maryland, and he's also a dedicated researcher of Korean mission history. We are so excited to be starting this new weekly series with him, where we'll be diving into his book, Remember and Repay, a 52-week mission devotional.
To start, let me ask you something. Have you ever gotten a gift that was, well, truly special? I'm not just talking about something nice you unwrap. I mean something that really changed your direction, something that set you on a totally new path for your life.
Well, as we're all standing here at the beginning of a brand new year, Pastor Huang has a gift just like that in mind. It's for every single one of us starting this new journey.
In fact, he says it's a special gift that he wants to give directly to you, something designed to really equip you for this entire year ahead.
And this gift, it's a BMW. Now hold on. Not that BMW. Let's forget about the luxury car for a minute. This is about the vehicle that's meant to drive your entire life. Okay, let's break this down.
First up, the B is for Bible. And in this spiritual vehicle of yours, the Bible acts as the tires. They would actually grip the road. They give you the traction and the solid foundation you absolutely need for the whole journey. Without them, you're just spinning your wheels, really going nowhere fast.
And here's what's so fascinating about this. Pastor Huang points out a really powerful piece of history. In Korea, the Bible actually showed up before the first missionaries ever did. It was the very first touch point, and it laid the groundwork for everything that came after. So when you start your year with the Bible, you're not just reading a book. You're plunging into this incredible legacy of faith that was being prepared all along.
All right, so you've got your tires on the road. The M stands for mission. If the Bible gives you the foundation to get going, then mission, well, that gives you your destination. Think of it like the car's built-in navigation system, a GPS for your soul, plotting a course that's filled with real purpose.
And this isn't some vague, abstract idea. When we actually look at the lives of missionaries, when we trace their footsteps, we start to see a map of God's work unfolding through time. It shows us how the ruler of history has been actively involved, and maybe more importantly, it trains our eyes to see that very same hand at work in our own lives, right here and now.
And that brings us to the final piece. The W is for worship. This is the heart of the vehicle. It's the special engine that powers the whole journey, right? The tires get you on the road, the navigation tells you where to go, but it's the engine that actually creates the movement. Worship is that power source, that fuel, or as the devotional says, the anointing of the Holy Spirit's oil.
And let's be super clear about this. This isn't just about what we do for an hour on a Sunday morning. No, true worship is this constant state of connection. It's about meeting God in all the little ordinary moments of your daily life, at your job, with your family, in your own quiet thoughts. That's the generator where the real power for the journey comes from.
So you can see how it all clicks together to create this complete system, right? The Bible gives you that solid foundation so you don't skid off the road. Mission gives you a clear destination so you're not just driving aimlessly. And worship is the engine, providing that constant power to actually move you forward. It's a fully integrated vehicle for a life of purpose.
And this just brilliantly pulls it all together. It explains the ultimate purpose of this whole journey. I mean, why have this spiritual BMW in the first place? It's not just for our own private trip. The goal of our mission is to point other people to that source of power, to help establish them as worshipers with their own engines running strong.
And with that, we'll leave you with this really powerful blessing from Pastor Huang's devotional, a prayer for your journey this year. May you all be used for mission. So that just leaves one final question for all of us to think about as we head into this new year. Your spiritual vehicle is ready. The tires are solid, the navigation is set, the engine is humming. The only question left is, where is your BMW headed this year?
Let me introduce you to Pastor James Huang. He's a dedicated researcher of Korean mission history who, after serving as a missionary in China, now ministers in Maryland. We're going to be sharing a story from his book, Remember and Repay, 52-Week Mission Meditation. And this week, we're diving into the mission history for the second week of January. It's an incredible story about a journey that truly changed everything.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at why one particular day is so important. Then we'll jump into the dramatic story of the first voyage itself. After that, we'll meet the people who actually orchestrated the whole thing. And finally, we'll explore the incredible legacy that journey left behind. All right, first up, a day to remember. Let's really dig into why this one date, January 13th, is so pivotal. You know, January 13th is officially known as Korean American Day, but it's so much more than just a name on a calendar. You can think of it as the very first page in the long, rich story of the Korean American experience. For millions of people, this is where it all began. And what's interesting is that it wasn't until pretty recently, December 2005 to be exact, that the U.S. Congress made it official. So what was it about that day over 100 years earlier that was so important it deserved its own special recognition? To really get it, we have to rewind the clock. We've got to go back to this unbelievable story of the very first group of immigrants and their incredible and pretty dangerous journey across the massive Pacific Ocean. Okay, so picture this. It's December 22nd, 1902. A steamship, the SS Gaelic, pulls away from the port of Jemalpo with over 120 hopeful passengers. But this was no direct flight. They had to make a really critical stop in Nagasaki, Japan for health screenings, a huge hurdle. And then, finally, after that long, tough voyage, they arrived in Honolulu, Hawaii on that fateful day, January 13th, 1903. And you might be wondering, who were these people? Well, it was an incredibly diverse bunch, all searching for a new life. You had about 50 church members traveling together, another 50 or so laborers and merchants, and then this mix of about 20 others. We're talking students, scholars, even servants. It was truly a cross-section of an entire society, all together on one ship. But man, this journey was just filled with heart-wrenching moments. The first major obstacle hits them in Nagasaki. During those health screenings, 20 people were told they couldn't continue. Just like that, their dream was over before they'd even really begun. And if you can believe it, the hardship wasn't over. After finally reaching Honolulu, so close to the finish line, the group faced one last screening. And incredibly, another 15 people were turned away, denied entry at the very last step. So, let's do the math. Out of more than 120 people who started this journey packed with hope and dreams, only 86 actually made it through. These 86 resilient, determined individuals became the very first Korean immigrants in America. Which, of course, begs the question, right? How on earth did a trip like this even get organized in the first place? Well, let's talk about the architects, the people working behind the scenes who made it all happen. I mean, seriously, think about it. It's 1902. Organizing a group voyage across the Pacific Ocean, that's a monumental task. The answer, as it turns out, lies with two American missionaries who were working in Korea at that time. And their roles were perfectly distinct. On one hand, you had Dr. Horace Allen. He was the diplomat, the one who played the decisive role in basically getting the door to America unlocked. But then you had Reverend George H. Jones. He was the one who made it all a reality. He organized the people and guided that very first group right through the door Allen had opened. And Reverend Jones wasn't just some outsider. He was deeply, deeply rooted in the community. He'd been in Korea since 1888 and had served in the Jemalpo region for 11 years. He was the pastor of the local Wesley Church right there in the port city the SS Gaelic sailed from. His connection to the people there was absolutely essential. But here's the thing. This whole story isn't just about those 86 people who finally set foot on Hawaiian soil. The impact of this one voyage was so much bigger. It turned what was just a tiny trickle of people into a steady, flowing stream. And I mean a major stream. According to records from the Hawaii Immigration History Museum, this one trip just blew the doors wide open. In just the next 2 years, from 1903 to 1905, an absolutely staggering 7,415 more Korean immigrants arrived on 64 different ships. This quote really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? The SS Gaelic wasn't a one-time thing. Not at all. It was the start of a huge movement. It was like the first domino to fall, setting off a chain reaction that brought 63 more shiploads of people, all building the very foundation of today's Korean American community. So that brings us to this final thought. When you think about the immense challenges, the health screenings, the uncertainty, the incredible courage of those first 86 pioneers, it really makes you wonder, what is the real legacy of their journey of hope and hardship for the millions who have followed in their footsteps? That's a powerful question to reflect on.
So how does a community actually put down roots in a brand new country? Well, for Korean Americans, if you want to tell the story of their immigration, you basically have to tell the story of their church. The two are so intertwined, they're practically the same journey. So let's dive in and see how this incredible story unfolded.
Our guide for this story is Pastor James Huang. He's a researcher of Korean mission history who served as a missionary in China and is now serving in Maryland. We're going to be drawing from his amazing book, Remember and Repay, 52 Weeks of Mission Meditation. And what you're about to hear is the mission history story for the third week of January.
You know, there's a saying that American observers noted way back in the day that just captures this whole thing perfectly. When Koreans gather, they build a church. It sounds simple, right? But that one sentence, it's absolutely the key to understanding how this community found its footing, its voice, and its strength in a totally new land.
All right, so here's how we're going to walk through this. First, we'll look at a story of two beginnings. Then we'll see where the very first seed was planted, out in Hawaii. From there, we'll follow the community to the mainland, watch it spread all across America, and then we'll wrap up by reflecting on this amazing 120-year journey. Okay, let's get right into it with the story of two beginnings. And I mean this literally. We're about to see how the official history of Korean immigration to the U.S. and the history of the Korean American Church don't just run parallel, they start on the exact same page. The year is 1903. To be exact, January 13th. This is the official start date for Korean immigration to the United States. And they didn't land on the mainland. They arrived to work on the sugar plantations in Hawaii. So, faced with a new world, a new language, and backbreaking work, what's the very first thing they did?
Well, that question takes us right here, to the first seed planted in Hawaii. It wasn't about waiting or getting settled first. It was this immediate, powerful need to create a home, both spiritually and for the community.
And the timing on this is it's mind-blowing. Not a few years later, not even a few months, but in 1903, the very same year they landed, these immigrants founded the Christ United Methodist Church. Right away, it became what's known as their mother church, a bedrock, a community center, and a sanctuary for people facing incredible challenges so far from home.
But of course, the story didn't stay put in Hawaii. As immigrants started making their way to the U.S. mainland, they brought that exact same blueprint for building community with them. And just look at the pace of this. By the end of that same year, 1903, a church was already up and running in San Francisco. Then boom, Los Angeles in 1904, another one in LA in 1906, then Oakland by 1914. It wasn't just happening, it was a full-blown movement, building these spiritual homes all up and down the West Coast.
But here's the thing. Because the church was the absolute heart of the community, it also became the main stage for its politics, and that meant conflict. The church in San Francisco actually went through a really painful split. It was between two groups, the Dongji-ho, led by Syngman Rhee, who would later become president of Korea, and the Kukmin-ho, led by the activist Ahn Chung-ho. And what were they divided over? The very direction of the Korean independence movement back home.
This just goes to show you these were never just places for Sunday service. They were active nerve centers for Korean nationalism. I mean, get this, the Olive United Methodist Church in Hawaii was actively raising money and sending it to the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea in Shanghai. That's a direct line from a church congregation to a government in exile.
Okay, so the community is now firmly planted on the West Coast. What's the next logical step? Well, it's a long one. The journey east, all the way across the continent. Now, this eastward move, it took a little more time. The New York Korean Methodist Church wasn't founded until 1921. Then came Chicago in 23, mostly started by students. And then you see a big jump, and after World War II, a whole new wave starts popping up in the early 50s in D.C., Philly, and Boston. The community was officially going coast to coast. And let's just zoom in for a second on one of these incredible people. The pastor of that Chicago church, Reverend Kim Chang-jun, he wasn't just a pastor. He was one of the original 33 signers of the Korean Declaration of Independence back in 1919. Think about that. There's this direct, powerful link between a church in the American Midwest and the very soul of the Korean fight for independence.
And let's talk about timing again. The Washington Korean Church was established in 1951. What was happening in 1951? The Korean War was raging. The homeland was facing this enormous existential crisis, and right at that moment, a community thousands of miles away plants a new church. It's such a profound statement of hope and persistence, keeping that cultural and spiritual flame alive during the absolute darkest of times.
And this growth just kept going, using that same Mother Church model we saw way back in Hawaii. So for example, the Washington Korean Baptist Church gets founded in 1956. It grows and becomes a community base. And then, what happens? Its own members go on to start new churches, like Global Mission Church and Fellowship Church. It's this beautiful organic way of growing that just keeps spreading.
And that brings us to our final section, where we can kind of step back and reflect on this whole thing. This incredible 120-year journey where the history of a people and the history of their faith are just completely woven together.
After the Korean War, and especially after U.S. immigration laws changed in the 1960s, the growth just hit the accelerator. This little snapshot of the East Coast says it all. You've got Baltimore in 67, D.C. getting another church in 68, Atlanta in 71. The Korean American Church was no longer just a few outposts. It was a powerful, nationwide presence.
So really, when you get right down to it, it is absolutely no exaggeration to say that the history of the Korean American Church is the history of Korean immigration. They grew up together, they shared every single joy and every single sorrow from those very first steps on Hawaiian soil all the way to the huge, vibrant communities we see today.
And so that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This whole journey started 120 years ago as a response to hardship, as a deep-seated need for community. The big question for today is, how does that shared journey continue? In the 21st century, what is the role of the Korean Church as it continues to walk alongside the immigrant community?
Pastor James Huang, who served as a missionary in China and now serves in Maryland, USA, is a deep researcher of Korean mission history. He delivers his book, Remember and Repay, 52-week mission meditations every week, and this is the mission history for the 4th week of January. And that brings us to the story of a man whose life was so deeply woven into the fabric of Korea that even in death, he would find his way back. We're going to dive into the incredible legacy of Samuel Moffett, a life defined by conviction, forgiveness, and an impact that has lasted for generations.
You know, sometimes a single date can feel like it defines a person's entire story. For Samuel Moffett, that date was January 25th. It's a date that marked not just the day he was born, but also the very beginning of his amazing journey in a land that would become his life's great work.
I mean, the symmetry here is just unbelievable. Think about it. He was born on January 25th, 1864, and he steps onto Korean soil for the very first time on his 26th birthday, January 25th, 1890. It's just incredible. This timeline really gives you a bird's-eye view of a life packed with dedication, conflict, and, in the end, a final return home.
So, how did it all get started? Well, after arriving, Moffett didn't just settle down in Seoul. No, he was a true pioneer. He went on several evangelism tours, and by 1893, he'd made a huge decision. He was going to focus his work on Pyongyang. Now, Pyongyang was a city with deep historical roots, and it was also the place where another missionary, Robert Thomas, had been martyred years before. Moffett's way of doing things was different. A lot of the early missionaries were pretty cautious, but Moffett took a much bolder path. He was all in on direct open-air preaching, taking his message straight to the people, right there in the streets. Yeah, as you can probably guess, that direct approach wasn't always a big hit. It was pretty confrontational for the time, and he often ran into some intense opposition. And we're not just talking about quiet disapproval. We're talking about open hostility and ridicule. This resistance would soon lead to a really famous and dramatic incident. During one of his sermons, that hostility turned violent. A young man in the crowd named Lee Ki-poong picked up a stone and threw it, striking Moffett and leaving him bloodied. It's such a stark picture of the challenges he was up against. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. In fact, this is where it gets truly remarkable. In one of those turns of history you just can't make up, Lee Ki-poong, the man who threw the stone, had a profound change of heart. He eventually converted, became a pastor, and was later ordained as the very first Korean missionary sent abroad by the Korean Church. The attacker became an apostle. It's just an incredible story of transformation. Moffett's vision went way beyond just his own preaching. He knew that for the church to truly put down deep roots, it needed Korean leaders. So, he got to work on building a lasting foundation for that future. And this was a very deliberate, step-by-step process. It started small, back in 1901, with just a single theology class for local church leaders. 2 years later, it became official. The Pyongyang Presbyterian Theological Seminary was founded, with Moffett as its first president. Then, in 1907, they hit their first major milestone. The impact of that first graduating class, all 7 of them, was just immense. Han Sok-jin went to Japan, Gil Seonju became a key figure in a massive revival movement, and look who's right there on the list, Lee Ki-pung. The very same man who once threw a stone at Moffat was now a graduate, becoming the first Korean missionary to Jeju Island. And that legacy didn't stop in 1907. The school Moffat founded became this incredible source of church leaders until it was forced to close. But its spirit, its mission, that lives on. It actually laid the groundwork for 2 of South Korea's major theological universities today. But Moffat's conviction wasn't just about theology. He turned into a passionate advocate for the Korean people, especially as they faced more and more oppression under Japanese colonial rule. A really key moment was the 105 Inn incident in 1911. This was a case where Japanese authorities completely fabricated a conspiracy. They accused over 100 Korean patriots and Christian leaders of plotting to assassinate the governor general, which led to mass arrests and torture. It was a total setup.
Moffat did not stay quiet. He and some other missionaries risked everything to stand up for the accused. He protested directly to the colonial government, he condemned the brutal torture they were using, and, so crucially, he reported the facts back to the church in the United States, bringing international attention to the injustice.
After dedicating his entire adult life to Korea, Moffat's time there came to a really unjust and sudden end. This final chapter of his story is one of sorrow, for sure, but, well, it eventually finds a beautiful sense of closure.
Even after he officially retired at age 70, he stayed in Korea. But his final stand was against the Japanese policy of forcing everyone, including Christians, to bow at Shinto shrines. For taking that stand, for resisting, he was forcibly deported in 1936. Just 3 years later, he passed away in California, an ocean away from the people and the nation he loved so much.
For decades, that seemed to be the end of the story, a legacy of service that ended in a painful exile. But then, all those years later, came the year 2006, and a final, poignant chapter was written. In this incredibly powerful and symbolic act, nearly 70 years after his death, Samuel Moffat's remains were brought back to Korea. He was laid to rest on the grounds of the university that carries on the legacy of the Pyongyang seminary he founded. After a lifetime of service and a painful exile, he was finally home. And that leaves us with this final thought. His body returned, yes, but his legacy in the churches, the universities, and the generations of leaders he inspired, that had never really left. It makes you wonder, what does it truly mean for a legacy to come home?